Hello, my name is Gary, and I was raised in the western United States, so I'm a native English speaker. I hope that you will enjoy this YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
Investiture of the Gods by Zhu Zhonglin, 1567 to 1620. Chapter 1, King Zhao and Goddess Nuwa. At one point in time, as King Da Yi of the newly established Shang dynasty of China walked through the royal gardens to gaze at the great beauty that lay before him, the flying cloud pavilion suddenly collapsed. As a single beam from the pavilion fell toward the king, Prince Zhi Zhao grabbed hold of the beam and threw it aside. After ministers such as Shang Rong and Mei Bo gazed at the strength that the prince possessed, they advised the king to name him crown prince. Thus, following the death of King Da Yi, Prince Zhi Shu took the title of King Zhao and became the new ruler of Shang dynasty within its new capital Morning Song. After 7 years of prosperity within the Shang dynasty, edges of evil tyranny began to evolve in the heart of King Zhao. As the first rebellion took place on the second month of the 7th year, Grand Old Master Wing Zhong, the head of civil affairs, went personally and rode out upon his great dragon to subdue them at the North Sea district. In the following day, the Prime Minister Shang Rong asked the king to head to the temple of Nuwa in order to offer their condolences on her birthday. Following the latter's consent, the king and his entourage marched from the capital's gates to the temple of Nuwa. As King Zhao enjoyed the palace's immense scenery after his arrival, he gazed into the eyes of Goddess Nuwa, who sat behind a celestial curtain. Overtaken by her unparalleled beauty, King Zhao used his ink brush to write a poem of her valor upon a neighboring pillar within the temple. Even after being reproached by Shang Rong for what disaster the poem could bring about, the latter simply brushed him aside, saying that it was nothing more than a literary representation of her beauty. After the king and his entourage had returned to the capital, Nuwa noticed the poem and immediately vowed to end the Shang dynasty due to the former's vile desires. Once she had arrived at Morning Song atop her phoenix, Nuwa realized that King Zhao still possessed another 20 years of reign. As she arrived at her temple, she summoned forth her 3 right-hand spirits, Daji, the 1,000-year-old female fox, Splendor, the 9-headed female pheasant, and Jade, the female lute. Thus, following their summoning, Goddess Nuwa told them to transform themselves into beautiful women in order to distract King Zhao from his state affairs, so that he would be overthrown in a further justified manner. Back in Morning Song, King Zhao, seated in great depression over the incredible, unattainable beauty that Nuwa had possessed, and thus wished to not perform any action until he could attain her as one of his lovers. After effectively calling Minister Fei Zhong to his presence, he suggested to the king that 100 women should be taken from each of the 4 Grand Dukes, so that he might have an opportunity to find a woman that ranked in beauty with Nuwa. With immense delight at such a grand opportunity, King Zhao rested for the night and would make his preparations in the following day. Chapter 2, The Rebellion of Suhu. The next morning, King Zhao prepared one letter for each of the 4 Grand Dukes, stating that 100 virgin women that possesses at least a moderate level of physical beauty should be presented before the capital as soon as possible. As Prime Minister Shang Rong reminded the king that such an action would only bring out mass contempt and future rebellion, King Zhao saw his reasoning and withdrew the edict immediately. When the 800 marquises had appeared to offer their allegiance to the Shang dynasty the following summer, Fei Shang and Yu Hun became extremely influential in court due to the leave of Grand Old Master, and thus asked for many presents and additional bribes from the wealthy classmen. However, Su Hu, Marquis of Jizhao, refuted such compliances due to his fiery resolve to stand against such injustices fully. Due to such, Fei Zhong and Yu Hun grew rather hateful toward Su Hu throughout the future. As the nation's marquises and dukes had arrived at capital mourning song to display their obeisance at the end of the year, the 4 Grand Dukes would be specifically placed before King Zhao and fully honored for great diligence in their duty. After the 4 Dukes had been well feasted throughout the day, King Zhao returned to his inner chambers and discussed the current situation with his 2 favorite ministers, Fei Zhong and Yu Hun. In a chance to force Su Hu to repent for his defiance, Fei Zhong declared to the king that the former possessed an exceedingly beautiful daughter that must be attained if the ministers were to continue to trust his decision-making. After Su Hu had thus been summoned to the Dragon Virtue Court, King Zhao told the latter that if he was to attain his daughter, Su Hu would be granted great wealth, rank, and recognition within the dynasty of Shang. As Su Hu declined with many words of insult towards the king's lack of virtue, King Zhao became rageful and ordered Su Hu to be arrested. However, Fei Zhong advised the king that if he allowed Su Hu to return to Jizhao out of consideration and personal dignity, the people of Shang would look upon the king as a worthy ruler that listens keenly to his people's desires. In such a way, Su Hu's daughter could also be more easily attained. Now, settling down to an extent, King Zhao ordered Su Hu to be expelled from the court. As Su Hu thus returned to Jizhao, he considered his choices. If he was to give his daughter to King Zhao, ministers of the court would think of him as slanderous and immoral. If he refused to hand over his daughter, the king would most likely attack his prefecture with an army in order to ensure that his defiance could not spread further. Carefully analyzing this, he decided it best to gather his own forces to fight Shang while he wrote a poem that represented hatred towards the Shang dynasty upon the Meridian Gate inside the capital mourning song. After King Zhao had taken notice of this immensely defiant poem, he ordered a force of 6 armies to be placed under his command during the newly established attack upon Jinshao. As General Lu Xiong elaborated his suggestions to the king, it was decided that Grand Duke of the North, Chang Haohu, and Ji Chang, Grand Duke of the West, would lead a joint force against Su Hu's city instead. At the capital hall, where the Grand Dukes and other high-ranking officials were present, Ji Chang ordered an investigation as to why a loyal subject such as Su Hu would be deserving of punishment. While Chang Haohu unconditionally accepted the king's words and headed out immediately with his army, once Su Hu had attained word of Chang Haohu's movement toward his territory, the former ordered his soldiers to be well drilled to defend the city walls against the king's army. As Chang Haohu's army of 50,000 strong soldiers arrived before Jizhao, Su Hu grinded his teeth in frustration after hearing from an intelligence officer that Chang Haohu was the enemy commander due to his one-sided reasoning. Amidst the roar of cannon, Su Hu presented himself before Chang Haohu and elaborated the rationale behind his defiance. Chang Haohu became enraged at his words and sent forth General Mei Wu to dispose of the former in a quick manner. Su Quanzhong, the oldest son of Su Hu, intercepted Mei Wu, who was cut down by Quanzhong after following 20 rounds of fierce battle. Now that Su Hu's son had won the first victory, an all-out melee was unleashed between both forces, resulting in Chang Haohu's eventual retreat. As the Jinzhao forces thus returned to the city, it was decided that a surprise attack would be ushered forth that night upon the latter's stockades as to deal a critical blow to Chang Haohu's morale and attain potential assistance of other neighboring powers, such as the Grand Dukes, after they had heard of Jizhao's strength. Once such a tactic had been fully employed at dusk, Chang Haohu fled to a newly established camp and drank his worries away at the thought of Ji Chang's future assistance. While his forces ignorantly slept for the night, Su Hu's forces charged forth with the furiousness of a tiger and slaughtered countless soldiers of Chang in mere moments. As the Shang forces fled in majority, Su Hu called off their pursuit after 20 miles of distance was traveled. While currently fleeing through the stars of night with his generals, Chang Haohu came to the conclusion that strict defense should be employed for the moment, while a messenger should be sent to Ji Chang in request for reinforcements. Unfortunately for Kong, however, Su Quanzhong suddenly appeared before the light of the moon, with his ambush party completely determined to put an end to the Chang's life. With his immense renown and resolve, Su Quanzhong easily defeated 3 generals of Shang single-handedly with his great dragon glaive. Chang Haohu, who became exceedingly fearful over Su Quanzhong's skill, fled away immediately from the combat. In a state of distraction over his father's sudden choice, Chang Yingbiao received a deep wound through his left arm from Su Quanzhong's glaive, and thus fled for his life in addition. As Su Hu held conference the following day, Quanzhong appeared before his father and elaborated his great victory in the previous night. With great joy, Su Hu smiled in admiration at his son's prowess, and thus made preparations for his next essential movement.